Back in the 1990s, I used to be a soldier deployed in NATO operations mostly. I am German by birth and joined my military very young. I didn't really have much direction in life. I just felt like it could be a good way to give back. Plus, then I would not have to worry too much about food and where to live and other basic stuff like that. The training was grueling. I won't go into it, but it is not easy to even become a soldier in my army. Never mind be qualified to take part in NATO operations. As an 18-year-old, I became a soldier in my country's army during 1980. This event happened to me back in 1997. During this time, I was actually stationed in Bosnia. I was to be part of the NATO cleanup and peace efforts following the end of the Bosnian War. Starting in 1995, NATO deployed both the I-4 Implementation Force and the S-4, the Stabilization Force. These forces were designed to properly implement the Dayton Peace Agreement and ensure stability and peace for the region. In very simple terms, these accords basically divided the country into two different entities. This was the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Republika Srpska. I think around 100,000 people had died during the 3-year conflict. So, because of this, we had a lot of things to rebuild and help with. We had to make sure that there were no bad actors or lingering conflicts. Now that all of the backstory is out of the way. For this period of time, I was assigned to a small group of about 5 or 6 soldiers in total. We were tasked with securing an old Serbian radar station that was left abandoned some years ago. The rumors about the place from the locals were pretty strange. Numerous reportings of things like lights in the sky and aircraft overhead. They would tell us that the place was haunted and that it was used to imprison and kill people. They said that bad things happened there and that we should stay out. We of course just chalked this up to a load of local crap and superstition and stuff. We just ignored them because we had a task to do. We were ordered to sweep and secure this place for a few reasons. It was mainly due to it being unmanned and a danger to the people around it. The higher-ups were worried that it might contain equipment and resources that would be devastating if it fell into the wrong hands. I'm not talking about secret weapons or experiments or any bullshit like that. I'm talking about just things like weapons that have not been discarded properly. Things like live ammunition, grenades, maybe research that they left behind, things like that. It was apparently abandoned in quite a hurry according to intel that we had, so who knows what they could have left. We get to the place and secure the perimeter as per protocol. We leave a couple of guys outside to stand watch and give updates over the radio if they sight anything. Things were still far from peaceful. We still had the Liberation Army and shit to worry about, and who knows whose side the locals were actually on. It was very easy for them to turn on you if they think you are unaware. The front door is jammed, so we have to knock it down basically. It only takes us a few moments to break through the door. Once it's breached, we head in. The place is absolutely trashed. There were broken chairs, papers scattered everywhere, and dust thick enough to choke on, lining just about every surface. It did not look like the Serbs had packed up and left in any organized fashion. It looked more like they stripped the place bare in a panic. There was almost nothing in the way of abandoned equipment. There were wires cut out of the walls. There were equipment racks that lay empty. Everything was just stripped bare and shut down. Absolutely none of the radar equipment in the station was active anymore. We moved room by room, sweeping the upper levels first. We proceeded with the standard NATO protocol of checking for booby traps, live munitions, and anything else that could still be active. We did not find much of anything, which was weird. We definitely expected some stuff at least. What we found boiled down to some rusted shell casings and a couple of broken crates that might have held rifles once, but nothing really worth recovering. Definitely no working radar gear. Everything important had been gutted years earlier. At first I thought our orders were pointless. Just a big waste of time out in the middle of fucking nowhere in this hellhole. Putting ourselves at risk in an unknown and desolate area with who knows what kind of people lurking around. But then, one of the guys in my unit called us down to the basement. There was a heavy steel door tucked away at the end of a corridor, half hidden behind a collapsed filing cabinet. The door was old and was painted red at one point, but was all chipped and corroded now. All written across the door were faded stencils in Cyrillic. I did not speak any Serbian, so I had to get one of my other squad members to translate. He told us that it was just a standard entry forbidden sign and that there was danger beyond that point. He told us something interesting though. He said that some of the markings looked older, like they were Soviet style, not Yugoslav. We tried the handle, but of course it was locked solid. The hinges were swollen with rust. The call was made to breach the door anyway and secure whatever was beyond. Our orders were pretty clear at that point. The orders were to secure the entire site, recover any and all equipment, and if something was sealed off, then command needed to know what. Tearing the door down took 2 of us with a crowbar and a sledgehammer, but eventually the hinges gave way. The door creaked open into a dark concrete tunnel. We could immediately smell something horrible. We put our flashlights to work and headed down a narrow corridor. The corridor was maybe 30 or so meters long, and it led deeper underground. We all went in single file with our weapons up and ready. We were not expecting any resistance or any people, but standard protocol still calls for it. The higher-ups never mentioned anything about any kind of hazardous material on site to be cautious of. They stressed that this was just equipment and intel recovery. Our steps echoed like crazy going down that corridor. If there was anyone down there, then they would have heard us. At the end of the corridor was another chamber. It was just bare concrete. It was a square box that was maybe 6 meters across in total. At first it looked empty, but we quickly realized that was not the case when we swept the corners with our flashlights. The place is just piled fucking high with bones. There must be, I don't know, hundreds of bones in this little room, stacked neatly into piles like they are fire logs or some shit. Human fucking bones stacked up like it's nothing. Most of these were very clearly human bones from arms and legs, but there were other bones in that pile that looked slightly longer. Some of the bones had cracks in them, and other ones looked like they had an extra joint or extra bones in the arms where they shouldn't be. Some of the bones just did not look human, and so we were just stood there like idiots, trying to work out what kind of an animal has human-like bones but fucked up like that. We figured maybe it could have been people with abnormalities, but so many of them all in one place. It just seemed crazy. And why underneath a radar station? It's not like they had some top-secret lab or any kind of high-tech military equipment. We took a closer look at some of the bones. My instincts told me not to pick any of them up, and I even was scolded by other members of my unit, but I still picked one up anyway. It had small little etchings into the corner of the bone. It looked to be a number, maybe, but it was much too faint for me to be sure. I did not bother checking any of the other ones. I placed it back down in disgust. We did not stay down there any longer. It was very clear that there was nothing there for us to recover, and so we reported back in to our higher-ups. We were told to write up a brief report documenting what we saw, and to just rip out a few old computer systems that were still left. The tunnel was ordered to be collapsed and resealed, and it was carried out quicker than I thought it would be. The radar station was condemned instead of being repurposed, and I'm pretty sure it got knocked down eventually. That is not where the story ended though. It's about a week or so later, after the radar station operation. One of the guys who went into that place with us and down into the tunnel, name was Jurgen. He fell into a bad way. Just seemed really bummed after we left the place, and he fell into a pit of depression. He stopped washing himself, and even just joking around with us. He stunk like shit. And then, out of nowhere, while we were out on patrol, he just starts coughing up all of this blood. I mean, it was more like he was fucking vomiting the blood with the way it was all spewing out like a fountain. We called in for medical, and luckily, it did not take more than 15 minutes for him to be lifted and treated. We also had a combat medic with us, treating him on location. Medic tried to ask him what was wrong, but he could not even speak, and his eyes went all bloodshot. He started gripping the medic's hand really tight, and squeezed with all of his might the whole entire time. He just stared and would not take his eyes off of him. I had never seen anything like it in my life. I was fully convinced that he was going to die, even though me telling it like this now, that seems a little bit overdramatic. Once he got medevaced, we did not see him again. Not in an ominous, spooky way. I just don't think he was considered fit for duty again after that. I could not possibly tell you what kind of medical condition caused that, but I reckon seeing those burns and shit fucked him up mentally. The trauma probably is what made him distant, and is probably why he could not come back. Anyway, I want to say maybe 2 or 3 weeks after that incident, we were just out on a standard patrolling mission. We are just securing borders and shit in another remote village, nothing really of note. I am with like 3 other guys, and they are all ahead of me. I start to get this gnarly headache and start to fall behind. My vision just starts spinning, and I start to see all these weird black spots in my vision. I start hearing what I think are voices out in the trees, calling my name. I keep spotting jet black figures dashing along the tree line, skulking around above us and watching. I have got a bad feeling, and I think someone is preparing to ambush us. And then I start to hear whispers. It's just faint and low, and it sounds Serbian. My squad mates are too far ahead, and I have lost them now, so I start running to catch up. And then, at the base, near the river, I see it. I see other soldiers that are not ours. I am already thinking, shit, they must have done something to my guys. I am just locked up, staring at them. There is a few of them, with my gun drawn, but not pointed. They spot me. One of them shouts something over to me, but it is in Serbian, and I do not understand. He pulls out a gun and points it at me, and says something aggressively, which I assume is a threat, and I reflexively point my gun at him too. He is wearing the uniform of a Bosnian Serb, and I am thinking, oh shit, I am going to die here in the middle of nowhere. The other 2 are still at the base by the river, but are starting to run up towards us now, and as the guy looks back for a second, I manage to grab his gun. Once I have taken his gun from him, I know my chances are slim, so I started to beat him with it. I am beating the fuck out of this guy with the butt of the P8 that he was holding, and he is just gushing blood. He can barely hold his hands in front of himself to try and stop me. He is muttering something barely intelligible in Serbian, and I guess he is begging me to stop. I am shouting for help now. I am shouting for my squad to come and help me. If they had ducked into the bushes to avoid detection and to observe the situation, I needed help, and I needed it now. But the other 2 Bosnian Serbs get to me, and they grab me. They pull me off of the guy on the floor and have me in a full Nelson. I am fighting and squirming, and all of a sudden I can understand what they are saying. They are asking me what the fuck is wrong with me. I just shout out, "You're all the enemy, you're trying to kill me." But then something just twigs in my brain. They're not speaking Serbian, and they are wearing NATO uniform. The guy on the floor is not a Bosnian Serb. He is my squad mate, and I just beat him half to death. Oh shit. I am pinned down to the ground. Medical assistance has been called, and higher command has been informed. I try to explain, but they do not want to hear it. They just tell me to shut the fuck up. I had to explain myself in front of a military tribunal. I had to go over my story again and again and again. Every single minute detail was pored over and scrutinized, until I didn't even know if I believed myself anymore. After going through that for a long time, and being examined by what seemed like 1 billion doctors and therapists, the event was eventually just chalked up to stress and trauma. Mainly, they decided it was because of what I reported seeing in the radar station. I kept having nosebleeds and stuff while I was in medical, but never anything more serious than that. I have not had one in years either. I was eventually discharged, and that was the end of my time serving. Sorry that the ending is kinda anticlimactic. I don't really know what else I can say. Hey, hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you want to hear more, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment because it lets YouTube know you like the content and helps more people to see these videos. My next big goal for the channel is 100,000 subscribers, and as a celebration, I will be doing a Q&A video once we hit that goal. Thank you, and back to the stories. This happened to me back in 2003. I was deployed in northern Kosovo as part of a NATO contingent. I've been in the Bundeswehr since I was 19, mostly doing logistics and security for field operations. But that summer, I was temporarily assigned to a forward operating base, FOB, on the edge of the Mitrovica Valley. The FOB itself was small, barely more than a cluster of prefabricated barracks. There were a few shipping containers converted into storage and a makeshift command post too. It sat on a hill overlooking a bend in farmland. Most days that I was stationed there, it was quiet. Way too quiet for my liking. The mission that we were assigned to was pretty straightforward. We were to monitor the border regions for any insurgent movement and keep supply lines open. The local Albanian and Serbian populations were wary, but mostly left us alone, as long as we stayed in our perimeter. I was on the night shift that week, paired with a British soldier named Carter. The nights were long, cold as fuck, and the radios never stopped chirping with static. One night, at around 0200, we noticed that the perimeter cameras were down. This wasn't just some kind of a glitch with the systems. The feed was just plain dead. This was a total blackout. The other soldiers were inside, eating or sleeping. Only Carter and I were outside. Naturally, we went out to inspect. We did not spot anything. There were no movements or footprints, or even so much as a bush swaying in the wind. The ground was frozen solid, and there were no tracks left behind in the dirt. But then we noticed something odd. It was all of the animals in the area. I'm talking birds, stray dogs, even cows in the distant fields. They were all just gone. It was as if the valley itself had gone quiet. At first we just chalked it up to a power surge, but over the next few nights it kept happening. Every night around the same time, the cameras would die, the lights would flicker, and the valley would go silent. The weird part was the smell. It wasn't a terrible smell exactly. It was just off. It smelled really metallic, like iron or something like that. Just breathing in that scent gave me a dull headache sometimes. I started getting really sick of it. Then, one night, Carter just up and disappeared. I did not spot him anywhere in the field, nor outside the wire. He was just gone. I could not explain it. He was nowhere to be found in the fucking barracks. His bed was completely untouched, like he had not bothered to go to sleep the night before. His boots were just neat by the door. I asked around and no one heard a thing. No one saw him leaving the barracks, and no one reported any odd behavior, or even so much as a weird noise the night prior. We obviously reported this to the senior officers, and I was dead worried. The CO, though, he just shrugged it off and told me he probably wandered into the village, or a local patrol had picked him up. The search parties that we sent out to recover him found nothing. They came up completely empty. I'm talking no tracks, no sign of clothes or blood. His disappearance was a complete mystery. After that, the rotation got worse. The rest of my squad started whispering about seeing someone moving outside at night. They would talk about shadows that did not make sense and faces in the dark that were not human. I thought they were joking at first. That was until I saw them for myself. I was doing perimeter checks at around 0300 when I caught movement at the edge of the tree line. There was no mistaking it. It was definitely a man. He was tall and thin and was dressed in fatigues that looked like ours, but just weren't quite right in places. It was small details like the patches being wrong and the insignia missing. The man moved in jerky, unnatural motions like a puppet. I raised my rifle and shouted, asking him to identify himself. I told him that he had entered an official NATO camp and that we were armed and authorized to use deadly force if necessary. He did not respond to me or even react to my calls. He just vanished behind the trees, leaving nothing but a faint smell of iron in the air. After that, morale dropped. Nobody wanted to walk the perimeter alone. All of our radios would keep picking up strange, low-frequency static. I could swear that sometimes it sounded like voices or sometimes like breathing. Nobody would believe me when I told them though. They thought I was just imagining things in the static. Our command insisted that it was just interference from nearby transmitters. I wanted to believe that. I really did. The final straw came one night when I was on watch again. At around 2:30 a.m. on that night, I heard footsteps approaching. I aimed my flashlight and there was nothing there. But then I saw my reflection in the glass of the command post window. And my reflection was not alone. Behind me stood another soldier, wearing my exact uniform with an identical face, but expressionless instead of the pants-shitting one I probably had on. I spun around, but again, there was nothing there. After that, the FOB was closed down. We were rotated out within a week. Carter was never found. Some of the others refused to talk about it and just called it stress. We never, ever got an explanation for Carter. I imagine it was put down to him deserting, but still, what the fuck? This happened to me back in the year 2006. I was deployed in southern Afghanistan with a small NATO logistics unit. I had been in my country's military for 6 years at that point. That was mostly just working transport and supply chains though, which meant I saw a lot of the dusty highways that ran through contested territory. It was not glamorous work, but it was honest. Most of the horror was just waiting, the sun baking on your back, the engine whining, the radio static. Our task that summer was simple on paper. We were to escort a convoy of fuel trucks from Kandahar to a remote base in Helmand province. It was to be a standard convoy consisting of 6 trucks, 2 armored personnel carriers up front, 1 in the rear, and a squad of us riding in the lead vehicle. We had made this trip before, so we knew the risks. There was always the risk of IEDs, insurgent ambushes, or the occasional reckless driver. But that morning when I woke up, something just immediately felt off. The checkpoints along the road were quiet. Every village that we passed by was empty and barren. Even the birds were absent, which is a stupid thing to notice until you notice it. James, one of the Brits in our squad, joked that it meant the Taliban were napping. I did not laugh. I don't think anyone ever laughed at one of his lame-ass jokes. At about 2 hours in, we hit the first signs of trouble. We spotted some smoke on the horizon. It did not look like a typical fire. We spotted thin black spirals rising from what looked like abandoned fields. They definitely were not out here cooking a meal. One of the drivers slowed down instinctively. The radio crackled. No one responded. We just kept moving. We maintained standard procedure, which is basically, don't stop moving for anything. And if in doubt, speed the fuck up and keep going. Maintain formation and keep your eyes open, or God knows the worst will come true. I noticed a group of kids on the side of the road. They weren't waving or running. They were just standing there and watching us roll on by. They were much too still and unshaken by a full military detail rolling by. One of them had a rifle. We had to be careful. The Taliban were notorious for using children for reconnaissance roles, as obviously, we do not want to gun a child down unless we were absolutely forced to. It was pretty clear from the way that they were standing that this was just intimidation tactics. Weak ones, but knowing their plan did not exactly make us feel any better. The convoy commander ordered us to continue, but I could feel the tension. Everyone was quiet. You could hear the engines, the wind, even the crunch of sand beneath the tires. It was like time slowed down, leading up to the inevitable disaster. Then it happened. There was a small explosion not far ahead of us. A mine had been set off, or more specifically, a rigged IED. One of the fuel trucks went up in fucking flames. The APC at the front tried to push through the dust, but the detonation had taken out part of the road. There was just smoke and fire and heat washing over us. We pulled over and returned fire at nothing. The insurgents, wherever the fuck they came from, had disappeared. The convoy commander barked orders. He told us to pull back, secure the perimeter, and check the damage. That's when we saw the bodies. We spotted 3 civilians. It was a woman and 2 men just lying beside the road. They had been shot, beaten, and stripped of their possessions. Their truck had been a passenger vehicle. It was not a part of ours or carrying anything important. They were just innocent people. We radioed the incident in. Our command told us to keep moving no matter what. They emphasized that this was a logistics mission and not a combat mission. They told us specifically, and I can still remember this all these years later, that it was not our fight. They told us to move the trucks ASAP or risk losing them all. We argued and shouted, and I had never felt so much fury in my life. One of the younger soldiers, Sven, refused to leave the bodies behind. He wanted to call in air support and risk exposing the convoy. The commander slapped him across the face. Sven did not talk for the rest of the day. He was reprimanded later, of course. We continued down the road with the heat and the dust making everything look surreal. Trucks loaded with fuel, people burned out, kids with rifles standing silently in the distance all along the way. I kept thinking about those bodies lying there while we drove past. The next incident was not an ambush, it was worse. About halfway to Helmand, one of the convoy drivers lost control. It was a narrow dirt road with an embankment on one side and fields on the other. The truck went off the edge. There were flames immediately. The fuel had ignited, I don't know how. The tires were just straight up melting. And the worst part is that the driver was trapped inside. We managed to eventually pull him out, but he was badly burned. He was just shouting and panicking, and we could not calm him down. Another soldier tried to help him, but the fire spread too fast. We had no medevac, and there was no hospital anywhere nearby. The rest of the convoy waited as we tried to stabilize him. I remember his screams. I remember his eyes. I can still hear them to this day. We did what we could, but he did not make it. Later, after that hellish day, we pulled into the base. Our command wanted reports. I typed mine up, but I had to be careful to use the neutral terms. Civilian casualties instead of woman and 2 men lying on the road. Vehicle accident instead of burning driver screaming for help. It had to all be sanitized and detached, and it was pure horseshit. I wanted to tell them what I really thought about how fucking evil this shit is. That night, in the barracks, I could not sleep. Sven came up to me all quiet-like and with red eyes. He just whispered to me, "We're supposed to be the good guys, right?" And when I tell you I was fucking dumbfounded, I mean it. I was already on edge, but I felt like my entire worldview had collapsed in on itself at that very moment, and I felt so hollow. I felt like a cardboard cutout, just a fucking pretender. I had no answer for him, because there was not one. Over the next few weeks, the missions kept coming with no break in between. No time to rest or reflect or to mourn and process. You just had to keep going. Every convoy, every checkpoint, more civilians caught in the crossfire, more accidents. You start to notice the pattern. Command measures success in kilometers traveled and supply delivered, but never in people saved. They don't care about faces or real lives. Soldiers they had to care about because they needed people to do their dirty work. I mean, fuck. We were supposed to be here to save people, to free them from corruption and insurgents and the horrible living conditions, right? Or whatever fucking bullshit they fed us. It breaks you down slowly. You don't notice it until months later, when you stop reacting to the smoke on the horizon, when you drive past the bodies on the road and just keep going. Your mind has to build walls around empathy just to survive out here. You start talking in numbers just like them, because if you keep on caring and feeling that hurt, you don't last. Human life becomes another metric, because if you don't build a wall, you will end up dead. I left Afghanistan in the year 2007. I was discharged in 2008. I have not convoyed since. But I still drive past highways in my home country, and I see the same scenarios in my head, and I feel that same uncontrollable and powerless rage on a day-to-day basis. I sometimes just sit there in my car and think to myself for hours on end, what was it all for? It felt pointless. I felt pointless. The horror was not the explosions. The horror was not the ambushes. Sure, they scared the fuck out of me, and I did not want to die, but at least I could fight them. At least I could react to those things and change the outcome. Really, it was the rules, the bureaucracy, and the system telling you to move forward while people burned by the side of the road, the people that you could not save. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see the convoy, the black smoke, the endless line of trucks, and I hear that screaming driver. And I wonder, if I had stopped, really stopped, would any of them have lived, ever? Or would I have ended up dead? Would the system have eaten us alive instead? Either way, Even though it's a cliche, it's a fucking cliche for a reason. I learned very quickly in that war, the only monsters are human, and sometimes, the worst ones are wearing the uniform that you trust.